Matt Walsh goes off on Cenk Uygur and Ana Kasparian on his show. They try to demolish him, so this is Matt Walsh's response to them, and they failed, and Matt Walsh obviously won. Thank you guys so much for watching Bring the Asteroid. Make sure you like today's video, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my personal YouTube channel linked in the description. I post twice daily on both channels, so anyways, let's get into it.
During one of these daily cancellation segments last week, we discussed the violent nature of football and other contact sports, a violent nature which had come under intense scrutiny by the media after, as we talked about, Bills defender Damar Hamlin nearly died on the field during a Sunday night football matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, as far as we know, the Hamlin incident may not have had anything to do with football violence. Still, to this point, all we know is that he had a cardiac emergency in the middle of the game. We have not been given any direct evidence that it was actually caused by a collision on the field, though it certainly could have been. Either way, whatever the exact cause, it remains an extremely rare occurrence that anyone has to be taken off the field by an ambulance and brought immediately to the hospital. That's rare. It doesn't happen very often. This in spite of the fact that football is indeed a violent sport. And as I argued during that segment, it should remain a violent sport. Now, it's good to have these kinds of physical, even brutal, full contact sports, if for no other reason than the fact that they serve as relatively healthy, relatively safe, relatively productive outlets for male aggression. One of the great services that sports like football provide for society is that they give young, aggressive men and boys a way to harness and channel all of that energy. This is one of the central reasons why sports exist to begin with. The violence is not the whole point, but it is part of the point, and it's an important part. Take it away, and these young men will find other outlets for their aggression, outlets which you will discover are not nearly so safe or controlled as football. That was my basic point. And it was a point that proved to be very upsetting to people on the internet, especially after our marketing team at Media Matters posted another of their carefully cropped clips of my monologue to Twitter. The full monologue, which fleshes out my point in rather precise detail, went on for, I think, 12 or 13 minutes. But Jason Campbell at Media Matters posted the 75 seconds, which he felt was the most likely to make the pitchfork mob upset, especially when isolated from the full context. And it seems that he made the right choice because his clip garnered nearly 10 million views on Twitter and provoked lots of angry reactions. Before we continue, I think it would be fair for me to, go back and we'll show the part of that monologue that he posted, and then we'll talk about it. Here he is. Let's consider football itself as a sport. Despite any rule changes or updates to the equipment, it is still a fundamentally violent sport. That's true.
It is. It's objectively true. Why? I'm surprised people are shocked by that.
And that's what it always will be.
Like, people will get triggered by anything these days.
Is that a bad thing? No, it's not. In fact, it is a good and healthy thing. It is good that football is violent. It should stay violent. It is good to have violent sports. Okay? We should have violent sports. If anything, we should have more of them, because a violent sport like football is, among other things, a relatively safe, and relatively productive outlet for male energy and aggression. Okay, there's a reason why many of the media articles being written and freaking out about football are being written by women. Because football is not, no matter what the NFL is trying to do, football is not for women. There might be some women who get into it, but it's not really for women. It's not for...
Obviously, I would never think about playing football. Honestly, get women out of sports in general, please.
For you, you don't understand it. You're not meant to understand it. This is actually a man's thing.
Yep.
This is why violent games have existed in every society going back to primitive times. They are a means of channeling and harnessing male aggression. Okay, so I did say that football is a man's sport, which, why did I say that? How could I possibly justify such a statement? Well, because football was invented by men and has been played almost exclusively by men, and the vast majority of its fans are men and have always been men and will always be men. That's why I said that. Does that mean that no woman has ever watched football or been a fan or been involved professionally at some level? No, it just means that football was made by men and mostly for men.
Yeah.
This is a...
Why is this controversial?
Statistical and historical reality. It isn't really up for debate, okay? If it interferes with your girl power fantasies, that's your problem, not mine. I don't really care. And apparently it did interfere with lots of people's fantasies, which is why there were many tweets explaining why my statements were terrible and wrong and hurtful and sexist and so on. This continued
Of course, classic.
until the scholars over at the Young Turks got wind of the controversy and decided
The Young Turds.
to devote a lengthy segment responding to and supposedly debunking my claims. The title of this segment on YouTube declares that, quote, TYT demolishes right-wing alpha male Matt Walsh for his most recent sexist rant. Now, this is nothing new. I've been demolished by many a left-wing YouTuber over the years, demolished at least according to the titles they put on their videos. But as we've seen many times in the past, these demolitions usually end up being rather anticlimactic, if I must say. Rarely do they live up to their own hype. Perhaps, though, this Young Turks video will be different. Perhaps my demolition will finally come to fruition. Let's watch and find out.
That is the infamous fascist, misogynist, and other badist Matt Walsh insisting that football is only for men. And we are about to prove him completely wrong. Who could have seen that take coming? Cenk did. Called it perfectly just yesterday, right here on TYT. Check out this clip.
So now it looks like the right wing is trying to frame it like, oh yeah, I remember when people were real men and they just didn't mind people getting killed on the field. Now the libs want to make this soft so there isn't as many deaths on the field.
Thank God you're wearing a slightly different colored shirt. Otherwise, people could have thought you did that live. But
yeah, no, I knew they were gonna eventually celebrate the fact that the guy almost died, right? And like, oh, it's supposed to be a violent sport, man, yeah. And chicks wouldn't understand nothing about it, huh?
My favorite thing about this dude is that his dumb guy voice is indistinguishable from his regular voice. He's doing an impression of an idiot and yet sounds just like himself. And speaking of sounding like an idiot, he misses the point entirely, of course. If there is a right-wing take on the Damar Hamlin injury, it's that it's not an injury. Cenk, is that how you pronounce it? I honestly don't know how to pronounce his name, is trying to straw man us, but he's hilariously using the wrong straw man. If there was a conservative position on this topic, which there isn't, okay, because it's not a political issue, but if there was, it would be that Hamlin collapsed for reasons wholly unrelated to football. The predominant view among conservative pundits on the internet, from what I've seen, is that I'm much more plugged into that world than he is that this may have had something to do with the vaccine. Whether that's wrong or right, like that's when it comes to the Damar Hamlin thing, that's the thing that most conservatives were talking about. Very few are using this as an occasion to defend violent sports. I am, but I'm not the official spokesman for conservative pundits. And none of us are, as he says, celebrating the fact that the guy almost died. That's not happening anywhere. So, we were promised a demolition, and instead, so far, we've gotten a series of completely arbitrary and irrelevant straw men that bear not even a passing resemblance to any argument that anyone has ever actually made. Not a great start, but let's continue.
The video had two parts, right? So there were really three parts. One is not so bad. He's saying, look, it's a societally acceptable way of releasing some of the violent urges that people in society and men in particular have. That's not that wrong, right? But when they celebrate, the second part is celebrating like, oh, violence is a good thing. Yeah, oh, yeah, it's great. No, but wait, it doesn't have to be this violent. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. I'll just tell you real quick. Between 1900 and 1905, 45 different people died on the football field because it used to be even more violent. They would literally kill each other on the field. And guess what happened? The government stepped in. It was Teddy Roosevelt when he was president and said, I'm not gonna let you kill each other on the field like this. This is insane. You have to make it less violent. And you know what happened after that? It became way more popular because people didn't want to go see a sport and have people murder each other on the field. And so it doesn't mean it's gonna be less popular. It doesn't mean it's gonna be less of a sport or anything along those lines if you don't celebrate people like Damar Hamlin almost dying on the field.
Oh, okay, I get it. So this is, I see what's happening here. This is the exact opposite of a demolition. Actually, he agrees with my argument, but is trying to find a way to disagree with it. He concedes my point about football being a healthy outlet for male aggression. That was essentially my entire point. So if he will admit that I'm right, or in his words, not that wrong, then there's not much else to talk about. But he keeps talking anyway, even after having long since run out of anything relevant to say, as is his custom. He observes that football used to be a lot more violent than it is today. If that sounds familiar, it's probably because I made the exact same point in the very monologue he's attempting to rebut. That's what I said. It's the left-wing media that tried to turn Damar Hamlin into a conversation about football's increasing violence. Remember, a White House reporter asked the president about is football becoming too dangerous? As I said in that segment, football is actually becoming much less dangerous. If there was a time to have a national dialogue about the violence in football, it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Today, it's about as non-violent as it can possibly be while still remaining something resembling the sport as it was originally designed. The Hamlin injury, if it was a football injury, was the result of a routine football play that was by no means especially violent or brutal. There would be no way to take that play out of the game without turning it into two-hand touch or flag football. Which is why, once again, it makes no sense to use Damar Hamlin as a jumping off point for a discussion about the violence of the sport. It has nothing to do with the violence of the sport. It was a basic, normal tackle. That's all it was. It was a not especially violent play in a sport that has become less and less violent with each passing year. That was my point. A point that Cenk restates while pretending to rebut. But now it's time for the woman on the panel to chime in, and she's the one, okay, this is where they're setting her up, okay, they're teeing her off, and this is where the real demolition is going to happen. She's going to set me straight. Let's listen.
Okay, so
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, Cenk and Ana, they never really, I mean, this was just Cenk, but Cenk, it doesn't really demolish anyone. He just screams and makes stupid points. So good job, Cenk.